Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Let's get started, inshallah. Uh, like always, we'll have an agenda for today, and then we'll try to follow that agenda as close as possible. Let's start with recapping what we did last time around, and then we'll go over each bullet item one by one. So last time we looked at Angular services and their definition and what it means by dependency injection, and we looked at how uh, Angular services could be used as one of the ways to manage state. And we briefly looked at uh, HTTP client and API calls, and we did not go over what is observable in a detailed manner or how to subscribe to that observable, which we moved it to the next session, that is today, and we'll go over them today, inshallah. And anytime you feel like my voice is down, let me know. And also anytime you need me to repeat something, also let me know. I'll be very happy to repeat it so that we get better at that particular concept. Then last time around we had a little time, so we looked at what is how do we activate a route, or how do we highlight a particular route if that is present in a menu item or its child components or child routes, to be precise. So today's agenda is, after that recap, we'll go over the HTTP client, API calls, observable or observables, and what is it means to subscribe to those observables. And we'll start with the basic form, HTML form, and look at the Angular capabilities that come along the forms module. So not only we already recapped what we covered, but let's recap our app itself as to where we left it, so that we can build on top of it, because we took a break of a week last time. It's better to recap a little bit. So we looked at how to make a router or a route active, or style it as active, using the router link and router link active options. So this refers to the route, and what happens if this particular route is active, we just specify a class or a CSS class that would be applied for the active route. And we looked at how to manage state briefly and very precisely, or just on one field, how to manage state or how to utilize the state management mechanism provided by Angular services using the currently logged in username. And this is actually possible because the Angular services are singleton, which means basically we have one instance of that service either across the application or within a specific module. In other words, because it was just one instance, we could add some property to it, assign some value, and access it across either the application or the module. Last time around, we had this. I made a couple of changes which I will undo and then go over what I did. Okay. This particular product service is more applicable to the product management rather than across the application, but provided in with the value route will make it accessible across the application, which we didn't want. So to scope it to just the module, we provide that this particular service with we scope it to this particular module using provided in property, and provide it with the module or the name of the module that we want to scope it to. The next change is I just added a condition: if the products already exist, already have been initialized, then just return those products instead of constructing new products. which makes sense for our further concept that we will discuss maybe in a bit, not right now. So with those two things taken care of, let's talk about HTTP client and API calls. So basically in real world, the products will not be hard coded like that. They would be fetched from a API, which typically resides on a different server. Even if it resides on on the same server, it will be served maybe using a different port or a different origin itself. So, for example, the products might reside at some particular location. Let's say it's still a local machine, or we'll have both the examples. So, let's say the API is installed at a server with the URL and if it is a local host, it will be something like this: local host some port 5555 and slash products. So Angular provides something called HTTP client, which is basically a shortcut or a mechanism to query this particular URL using one of the HTTP verbs or one of the action methods. And those action methods are, okay, let me enable chat if I forgot to enable it. And on side, if somebody has a question, then I could easily know if I have it on. So with HTTP, with REST API calls particularly, we can use one of these methods: get, post, put, or delete. So Angular HTTP client provides us with these methods. So for that purpose, we need to inject HTTP client provided in Angular /common/HTTP. So how to query, how to use that, we briefly looked at it, but we'll look at it again. This .http client dot, you see these verbs over here: delete, get, put, and post. There are others, but these are the most common. So we'll just not dwell a lot into others. So get at this URL. So as we can see from this little helper window, it accepts URL and options, and the question mark indicates that these options are optional. And within that options, if you do provide, then headers are optional, and so forth. So URL is the required one. So just provide that URL, and then when it gets back, what does it give us? What does it give us back is an observable. And what is observable of something of some generic type? So let me just assign it to a variable which will be of type observable, constant products. And normally the convention is to add a dollar sign for an observable at the end of it, at the end of the variable name, or suffix, in short, suffix it with a dollar symbol. So now if we hover over it, then it will say what kind of object or variable is this products dollar. It's an observable of object. It's just complaining about unreachable code detected, because we are returning the method from over here itself and we are writing some code after it, which will not get executed at all. So that was the first complaint, and the second complaint is product dollar is declared but its value is never read. We'll read that in a bit, but this is for demonstration, so I just added some code after the return statement. So how to consume that? If it was a method just like get product, so if you write get product, which is right on line 43 right now, how do we consume that get products return value? we just go and then we declare a variable, and let's call it just P for now. And if we hover over it, some ID, I need to provide that. That's another. So if we hover over it, in the type. So it's of type product, which we can directly consume. But how do we consume an observable? It's pretty simple. Observables expose or is data property, or to consume an observable, we need to do we observable provides three things. Actually, let's go over. Okay, observable is here. I was meaning to look at the go to the definition and have a look at it, but we'll look at it in just a bit. Somehow. Okay. In any case, it provides a next method and an error method and a complete method. So just have, I mean, that's a little bit theoretical, but once we have a look at it in a practical sense, then we'll be able to appreciate that. So how to consume is products dollar dot subscribe. So at the bare minimum, subscribe is next is when we subscribe, we get the values out of that observable. So let's go back to the observable and try to define it. Observables are or act on stream of data. If you contrast it to this method got get product, this is a scalar value. It just returns a product, one product, a scalar single value. Whereas observables are for a stream of values. So, and observables do not emit anything or do not give anything back until we subscribe to that. And just subscribing, we'll get something out of it, but to actually consume, we need to write an arrow function called next. And that next function looks like this. It gives us some data or some object, in this case, products. That products we can assign to our local products. This way, we get the products. This dot products equal to whatever we get back from that next call. We'll look at these complaints later on, but this is how we assign it. Just to differentiate, instead of just the plain products, I'll rename this as return products using the lower camel case. So what is it expecting? Okay, it's complaining about this semicolon, I guess. Okay, one of the things it was complaining is about the semicolon. Since it was a single statement, we didn't need semicolon. The type object is missing the following properties from type any. So the next it provides three things basically. One is the next method and one is the error method. Actually, there was a help over there. So as we can see, the subscribe, it gives us three things: the next function, an error function, and a complete function. So in case no error happens, then we get the value back in the next one. In case there is an error, some error occurs on the server, then we could utilize the next function that the subscribe provides, and maybe console, at this time just console.warn or console.error. We just write the error to the console, and typically the complete function is not used very much, but in case we need it for some cleanup operation, we could just use it. But right now I'll just write console dot just log that this call is complete. Get products API call is complete. So when I was new, I didn't get my head around this. It took me a while to actually get to understand this. To overcome that, what I used to do is write this. I mean, without I, I I understood at least that much as that we need a subscribe call to actually consume the data returned by this API call, and that data that is returned would be consumed in the next method, that is the first arrow function over here. And in case of any error, the second arrow function, and third is mostly not used, but I still write it as a good practice because I don't want to forget what exactly is returned by the subscribe. I need a 1 minute break. I'll be right back. So, okay, I'm back. Excuse me. So this is how we consume an observable. So as a practice, this is what I do. We make a call using the HTTP client, and it always returns an observable if it returns anything. So get always returns because get by the dictionary meaning of it is like, okay, get something, that means we are guaranteed that something will be returned. It might be null, uh, it might be an empty array, but regardless, we can assign the return value from that HTTP client's get to some variable, and because it is returning an observable, the convention is to add a dollar sign at the end of the variable name or suffix it with the dollar symbol. And once we have that, right away products dollar dot subscribe, and then it takes three things. Three. This is next, it will get me data, and we did not have a single statement here. If there is some more logic attached to it, then we can just enclose it in these flower brackets and add more logic to it. So let's say before consuming the product, we want to just ensure that it is not null. If data is not null, data is not null, then this dot products equals to data, and in case it is null, else equals to an empty array. We don't want null. If we don't want to handle null, we just take care of it like this. So, and then comma, the second function that the subscribe exposes is an error. You can just name it as E or ERR, just the name of the variable at that point of time. And similarly, we can have a block level statements over here instead of just a single statement or a bunch of statements. So we can just log, or normally in real world, we log it to some server that serves as a log server for that application. So that can be handled over here, and then complete is not needed. So we just leave it blank. That should be good enough. So this is what I used to do. So as a practice, if you start along these lines, once you get comfortable, you might not need to write all of that code and just write the code that is necessary. But anyway, this is a little bit theory about how to make that HTTP client calls and get the data from that API and consume it. Okay. And since we don't have a real API server right now, we'll just stick with returning these hard-coded values, but we'll utilize an operator called off operator provided by Angular that mimics the observable. So if I just do return this instead of return just this dot products, I'll enclose it in a operator called off, off. I need to import it from somewhere. Okay, it's already imported, but it's complaining it's still, maybe I'm missing something. Missing the following properties. Yeah. So I need to change the return type to from just product array to observable of the product array. And it's fixed in one, but it's not fixed in this if condition. So I'll just go ahead and fix that. Now I'm just returning an observable. I'm not consuming, right? I mean, the party that wants this data will consume it as per its requirements. So coming about 980. Yeah. That complaint is valid because this is not this dot products anymore. We need to consume it. So this will be products dollar that is an observable product array. Yeah. So I got a message that we can use a particular API. Uh, Maybe we'll, inshallah, to get those products, but we need our own API so that we can add to those products. Maybe it provides the add functionality too, but maybe eventually we'll do. But right now, let's stick to our code. And then actually, I had the Walmart API in my mind too. I just saved the API somewhere, but once we are done, once we are comfortable with the concept, then we can just play around. It's just a matter of changing the API, right? So we can go live with that. We'll try to. We'll see how it goes. Yep, great, nice. So now we have observable. Now we need to consume that observable and get the products array out of that and assign to our products property over here. How to do it? This dot products dot subscribe. So it accepts three things. We don't have to go to a new line. We can just write simple statements over here just for the demonstration. This dot products equals to data. And we don't need a semicolon because it's a single statement, comma, the next function, consume an error. If there is an error, just console. Yeah, since it is going behind the chat window, I'll just introduce a new line, console dot error. Particular error, and comma, for the completion we'll just leave it blank. So now if you go and yeah, the page is already refreshed, so we see the same data that we were seeing earlier. What we did is we mimicked an observable. So instead of calling a live API using HTTP client, we just use the auth operator. But to understand what's going on and why do we need this auth operator, we had to understand the HTTP client and how it works and what kind of return values it provides. So similarly, get product. So for this, the API call would be something like this. The URL will be some origin. I'll just forego it for now. Slash, like a local host at some port, or just let's say walmart.com/API. The endpoint, the complete endpoint at wherever these products are provided. So products, and to get to a particular product, we give it an ID, just like 1,000, something like that. So this will be the URL, and the call will be the same get. So instead of all the products, we are just getting one product. We are fetching something, so that would be get. This dot get dot HTTP client dot get provided with the URL. This again, because it's a get or any call from the any return values from the HTTP client would be observable. So it will be observable, but in this case, instead of products array, it will be an observable of a product. So let's mimic the same thing using the auth operator. Auth, and because this is auth observable, then we need to change the return type from a plain product to an observable of product. Would be utilizing anywhere this should get product. We just check. We were not utilizing it anyway, so or probably we were. Okay, maybe we were not. So anyway, this is how we mimic an observable. Next. Right. So we had a property of products which we were consuming in the template, and that property products was populated by a service call or an API call or a mimicked API call. And last time around, we've looked at a hook or we briefly talked about lifecycle hooks provided by Angular, and one of the most commonly used and basic lifecycle hook is on init. That means that exposes a method called ng on init, which we can use to write some initialization logic for that particular component. Over here, we got a subscription because we subscribed to an observable. And this returns us a subscription. So let me assign it to a new variable called product subscription. Yeah, so the concept is simple. Since we subscribe to something, we got a subscription back, which is aptly named a subscription. So since we have a subscription, this subscription will be active unless we unsubscribe. So where do we unsubscribe is on destroy, which basically means when this component is described, or in other words, when this component is navigated out, or some other component is loaded by the Angular. Maybe when the user clicks on, let's say, home, products will get deconstructed or unloaded, and then home component will be loaded. So in that case, this gets called on destroy, and we handle it in the on destroy method. I'm just utilizing Visual Studio Code's auto generation. We did it over here. I'll move it in the end. And over here, I can just unsubscribe it. Product subscription dot unsubscribe. So we'll have to take an extra step. This is the best practice. Not unsubscribing will result in a subscription being active and consume some processing bandwidth, and it's a good practice to actually unsubscribe. So that was about unsubscribing from an observable, and also demonstrates a usage of on destroy. Let me copy and paste and demonstrate another way of using that observable. So here, the first usage, we were consuming a property which was populated by an API call. And instead of consuming that property, we can easily consume subscription itself, or the observable itself, giving it a pipe or async. So just let's go back and have a look at if we are getting the same output. Yeah, we can see that these two products are repeated again because we repeated a call, but we repeated the ng for those products. But utilizing a different mechanism to actually load those products. So which one is better? If you don't have, if you don't need to process any more the return products, like in this case, for example, we are just consuming the data and assigning to this product property. We don't have any extra logic that takes care of some other stuff. For example, when I was describing the subscription, if you had to add some more logic over here, and it's not a single statement, we can enclose it in parentheses and then add more logic, right? If the data is null, then empty out the products, and if it is not, then uh, just assign the product property to the data itself. Or if you have any custom logic, then there is no way that we can utilize the second syntax. So, but in case where we don't have any custom logic, when we don't have any logic other than just assignment, this is better because we don't have to unsubscribe to the subscribable or observable explicitly like we did in the other case. So that using the second style will eliminate the need to actually unsubscribe. It eliminate the need to write this statement. So if this statement is not needed, then we don't have to maintain the variable holding the subscription. Right. So that's the advantage of using the second style. I'll just revert it back and maybe continue using. I'll just comment this out so that it stays over here for our reference purposes. And this operator is called a pipe symbol. And in Angular, we have different kinds of pipes which will go over further in the course. But just to note down what this is exactly. So this is pipe, and then after that there will be some text indicating what kind of action or what kind of processing needs to be done on this particular uh, piece of code just preceding this pipe. Any questions, please feel free to ask. Sometimes the concept is a little bit confusing. It's not so clear, straightforward. Maybe it will be clear right away, but down the line we get questions in our mind as to how something is laid out, and what if this and what if that. So if no questions are popping in your mind right now, feel free to ask them later. I'll be more than happy to explain it to the best of my ability, inshallah. Okay, now let's move on and try to work with forms. So what is a form? Form is basically asking the user something, some input, so that we could process that. That's most generic definition of a form that I can think of. But with respect to HTML, a form is an element where we ask user for some input on a website rather than, let's say, a hard copy or a paper copy asking him some input, him or her some input. So that is about brief definition of a form. And let's try to bring up a scenario where we might need a form in our application, even though it's just named app one, which is not very descriptive enough. But inside we have a product management component, and if need be, we can have more components, making our app very generic, very broad app. But let's talk about specifically product management module. This is a product management module, not a shopping website. I mean, that is the distinction that I have in my mind with respect to this module. And because it is product management, maybe there is a need of having a form where the user can add a product to the inventory. So having laid out the rationale why we need the form in this particular application, let me add a component that will handle addition of products to our app. So for that, we need to execute a command from Angular CLI, ng generate component, and what was our structure. For the moment, I'll close all the open editors. components, product management, and then we'll just have add product. And we can just verify it with the driving flag. So let me try to be a little quicker. Product, product management, that should be good enough. Slash add product. Right on. Yep, I'm sorry, I just got a call. I just needed to check if it was related to our session over here, which is not. So I just ignored it. Let's get back to our stuff. Okay, add product component is getting added in the right place. I'm fine with that. Let me run with, and it's getting added to the right module. So let me run it without the dry flag. So we have our add product module, and the next thing we need to do is add it to our route so that we can route to it. Oops. Okay, instead of trying to figure it out from there, I'll just use Control P command, and then this brings up this particular UI where I can start typing the name of the file that I want open. So add product is here, add product works, so I don't need this. Actually what I need to open is app module, and because that's where we have our routes. So okay, we are, because we are lazy loading our product management module, and the routes related to the product management module are under the module itself. So we need to open that module. Product management module, and then if the path is add product, this is my path. I'll just copy this path and then replace the things that we need. So comma, our new component, add product component, and then our routes are case sensitive, just to keep that in mind. Or instead of descriptive add product, add should be descriptive enough because it resides in add in the product management module. So add should be good enough as a route. So now that we have a route ready and it loads app.product.component, let's build a link to that add itself. So that link can be any place we want it to be, but one place that I could think of right away is maybe in the products listing somewhere down the line. Tag shref, we need to give it a route. Let's see if it can grab the relative route. I'm not sure about that, but let's try that out. Add product. Okay, I need to start the ngserve command again because I stopped it since I had to add a new component. So while it loads, let me open the app component, add product component, and try to add some UI over there. Right now it just says add product works. Okay, since the serve command is done, let's have a look over here. You can add link over here at all. It's not picking it up. Guess relative path wouldn't. So products was our route to the product management module, and I need to prefix it with product slash. Looks like, let's try that out. No, it's taking two things. Product slash products. We didn't need it. So add product works is loading. So this is good enough. Now let's build the UI for the add product, and typically this will be a form. And right now we just have a product name and a product brand. The like count, and like count is not inputable, or it depends on the likes, and we cannot have, I mean, if you want to manipulate the system and have some initial number of likes for a product, then we can, but that would not be ethical. So let's stick to just product name and a product brand for now. So for that product name, it should be a free form text, so it will be input of type text. And let's give it a name to the input control as product name. ID will have it the same ID as the name. Just copy that and add brand to it. Product brand, and we need a submit button. So this is bare minimum form. We'll try to expand on these forms as we go further. So the next thing we need is a button where the user can click on that button to actually submit those values. So value is add or submit, depends on the style that we want to. And if we are consistent with either submit or add, then we are fine. So let's go with submit. Type is submit, not just button. So let's look at the UI. Excuse me. So the first text box is for name, and the second one is for the brand. Let's add some labels to it so that it looks better. Label for product name. Let me just add a line break for now. I mean, this could be styled better, but let's not get dragged into that because it might consume a lot of time from us. So I'm trying not to style them at all, even though I am very inclined to. but that's a different course altogether. Let me add one more before the button. So this is nothing Angular about this form. This is plain HTML form, and if we want to make something required, then we just have to add a required attribute to this particular input. So in this case, we'll require both of them. So both of them are required now. Since we are not adding any functionality or feature at this point of time, I'm just designing the form, and we'll get into Angular specific stuff in just a bit. Okay, I'm just trying to think if we need anything else over here. Okay, and then we need on submit. On submit and submit the form. You just name that method or function generic enough, submit the form, and then we'll get into Angular specific stuff in just a bit. So this is plain HTML form until now. So the typical requirements is to disable the submit button until valid input is there. Right now, because we are requiring both of them, HTML itself will take care of something like this. Since we marked both these fields as required, the form will not be submitted until the form is valid, or each of these form elements, input elements, are valid. So in addition to required, let me add a min length validation to these fields in max level. This is still HTML stuff, nothing Angular, nothing specific to Angular about it. Okay, both. So now that our HTML is ready, let's get into Angular specific stuff. Angular on these controls, or each of these controls that are marked with Angular related stuff, provides properties called, I'll write them out over here. This E, which basically just refers to is the form in the most initial state. Was it even touched? If it is not touched, if it is not dirty, then it will be in a pristine state. As soon as the form is touched, the form or the input controls, if they are touched, they get into something called dirty state, and we have a valid and invalid states depending on the type of validation we have provided on each input field and on the form as a whole. So these are the properties that are exposed by Angular on each form control as well as the form itself. So let's add some Angular specific stuff to this form and the controls and see these properties in action. So first thing we need is to include or import forms module into the module that we are using the form set. So forms module. How to import it? From Angular/forms. Last time we saw that the Visual Studio, even though it recompiled, it didn't work really well when we added a module to the when we imported a module in a in one of our own modules. So I'll just stop and restart that ngserve. So while it does that, we'll switch over to the products, add product component and try to add Angular specific stuff. So once the module is ready, we have seen the template reference variables, right? So template reference variables is naming the any element in the HTML template using or prefixing it with hash so that we can access that input or we can access that HTML element using that template reference name that we have provided. So in other words, we have seen this earlier. So this will write out the product form over here using the interpolation technique. But with forms, we need to give not only the template reference variable, but another property that needs to be set. So this will be ng form. Now we can access the product forms or product forms properties related to their state. So form not pristine. We'll just have these in the HTML itself so that we can watch in the browser window. Just add BRs. So right away we can read those properties, add some kind of labels to it, which property we are looking at. Okay. Invalid and valid. I mean, as you can maybe as you can guess, they are just opposite of each other. And dirty, touched are kind of opposite of each other, or the pristine one. So is the form pristine? Yes, we haven't touched it. We did not ask. And is it touched? No, we haven't touched it. Is it dirty? No, we haven't touched it, so it will not be dirty. And is it valid? It is not valid because we gave it. We have some validation properties over here. I don't know why it is showing as valid, but we'll figure it out soon. In any case, I mean, these are the initial states. Once we progress further, we'll figure out what's going on, what's going wrong with the valid and invalid and why they are not updating right away. So anyway, so these are the states that Angular exposes for us and that could be utilized further on. So before utilizing them, let me add the same properties for one of our input controls so that we could observe that control as well. So now we have named this as product name. So before even that, one thing we need to do is similar to what we did to the form, we need to add a template reference variable so that we could refer to the control itself. and that goes something like this. So right now, this is just our name, what we gave to the form, and this is Angular specific that we need to give it exactly as is. Similarly, for input control, what we need to do is give it our own name. Let's call it product name itself, and equals to, we have to give something like this, ng model. And once that is ready, we just need to replace product form with and it used to be better. Right now it looks like it's better for me to paste them rather than use that functionality. Okay. So last time around we looked at something called ng model, but in a different context, the context of data binding to a particular property of the component. So this time around, let's bind it using ng model. This ng model is different than this ng model. This is for data binding, this is for referencing an input element that participates in the data binding. So product name, but we don't have the product property yet in the add product component, so I'll just add it over there. Product of type product, initialization. I'll just initialize over here itself. I don't know, maybe this is a better place. This dot product equals empty product. It will complain about that properties are not included, so I'll just include the property to ID to be 0, because the ID is supposed to be taken care of by the backend, so we'll not worry about that. Name, we'll leave it empty because the user will enter that name as well as the brand. Count equals to 0. Yeah. So similar to the form, we can see that our input field called product name is pristine, not touched, it's not dirty either. It's not valid. This is okay. Now it's giving me the right values. Valid is false because it's not valid. We had the validation of both the fields being required and minimum length should be 3. Let's observe those. Let me add autocomplete as off to this so that that suggestive text doesn't bother us. Okay. So as I start typing, minimum length is 3. So until 3, it should still be, the valid should still be false. So 1, 2, 3. Now the valid is true and invalid is false. Form still should have been okay because I did not assign any property to it or give it an ng model thing. Maybe it's acting as just valid from the Angular's point of view. So let me add the same thing over here too. Ng model is product dot brand. So 1, 2, 3. Our form is still invalid. And this particular control is valid now. Let's me go and add 1, 2, 3 over here. And as we can see, these are changing. The form is not pristine anymore. The controls are not pristine anymore. The form is touched. The form is dirty, in other words. And the form is valid because we gave it a valid input. Let me go beyond the max length. Actually, it's not even letting me enter, so it's still valid. And one more thing that in other words, these states let us do many things. And one of the thing is disable the submit button until the form is valid. Form is invalid, then disable. Now it is disabled. Now there is some brand doesn't exist. Yeah, I thought so. It should have been a smaller one, rather a smaller B rather than a big one. I don't know why it was suggesting B. Anyway, the compiler caught it. So I fixed that. And this is a very basic form, and we tried to look at what Angular provides in terms of the states of the form or the input controls and how to bind to certain property of the component. We have seen it earlier and again once more now using ng model, and this is to do a data binding. So whatever changes are made are written to this property of the property exposed by the component. So the property exposed by the component is product, and product in turn has a property name and brand over here. So that gets written from the template to the component as well as from the component to the template because it's two-way bond. And we utilize the forms because of the functionality it provides. Otherwise, we have seen earlier, maybe a couple of weeks ago, how we can just use data model to update our app title. And we talked about at that time how that is not feasible all the time or not practical or not a good practice all the time, because if we are writing to the database, we don't want to write to the database on each key up or each key press. So forms provide addition of something to the database as a unit, and also gives us the opportunity to actually validate the input. Over here we have seen three different kind of validation. One is required, and the minimum length and maximum length. We can opt out, let's say, of the brand being not required. Maybe something is unbranded, and which is just fine. But if the user is entering something for the brand, then the user needs to enter the minimum length as 3 or minimum 3 characters and maximum of 10 characters. So in that case, the form will be valid if the user doesn't enter anything in the brand, but will be invalid if the length of that entered input is less than 3 or greater than 10. So we'll try to expand on the form in our next session tomorrow, but these are the basics, and it's a good idea to just practice it because it's very simple, and still we can get a grip on it. If not, you already got a grip on it. As we get into things further on, there will be more things to grasp, more things to practice at one go. So it's better to have get a grip on it when the things are smaller and easily manageable. So keep practicing, inshallah, and we'll recap this a little bit and try to build a more complex form. And also, if you have any questions from on the subscribable or the observables, subscribe. And if we can have different ways of actually calling the API and not using subscribable. I mean, any question related to our topic, any question related to what we discussed previously, please feel free to ask. I'll be more than happy to help out as much as I can, inshallah. All right, let's stop over here and then regroup tomorrow, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.